In the third quarter of 2023, the economies of most countries in Southeast Asia accelerated marginally in the face of rising inflation, global economic downturn, and country-specific factors. Among the major economies in the region, the Philippines is the growth leader, growing by 5.9% in the third quarter, followed by Vietnam expanding by 5.3%, Indonesia by 4.9%, Malaysia by 3.3%, Thailand by 1.5%, and Singapore with minimal economic expansion of 0.7%. For the first 3 quarters of 2023, the Philippines is still the growth leader among the major economies in the region with an average growth of 5.5%, followed by Indonesia growing by 5.05% for the first 9 months this year. Vietnam with an average growth of 4.2%, comes next as Malaysia growing an average of 3.9%. Thailand expanding by 2% and Singapore by 0.53%. Mirroring the global downward trend in the third quarter of 2023, growth slowed in 2 of the 6 countries' economies, Indonesia and Thailand. While GDP grew in the Philippines, Vietnam, Malaysia and Singapore, from the second quarter to the third. Private consumption was the key driver of growth in most of these countries, especially in Indonesia, Malaysia, and the Philippines, where their share in the economy ranges between 60 to 70%. Weakening global demand contracted exports across most of the region. Singapore is one of the most affected economies given its high dependence on exports at 187% of GDP, followed by Vietnam and Malaysia, at 94% and 74% of GDP respectively. The tourism sector, however, is accelerating as the number of foreign visitors to Southeast Asia continues to increase. This is particularly important for Thailand, where tourism is one of their key sectors and prior to the pandemic, contributed 20% to GDP in 2019. The fourth quarter performance will be a setting point if the emerging ASEAN markets can achieve their 2023 economic goals. Only Indonesia had reached its forecast in the first 3 quarters, growing at an average rate of 5.05% compared to the 5% full-year economic outlook. The Philippines is required to expand by 7.4% in the fourth quarter to achieve its lower-end outlook of 6% for 2023. The Philippine government forecast its economy to grow by 6 to 7% this year. Likewise, Vietnam, with an optimistic outlook at the beginning of the year, expecting to expand by 6.5% full year, now requires a 13.4% GDP growth in the fourth quarter to offset lossy growth in the first 3 quarters. Malaysia's average growth rate in the first 9 months also failed to reach its economic goals set at the beginning of the year of 4%, growing only by 3.9%. Malaysia's economy is required to expand at least 4.2% to reach its 2023 full-year economic outlook. Thailand, whose outlook lowered twice this year to 2.7%, is required to expand by 4.8% in the fourth quarter to reach its economic outlook. Singapore, the worst performer in the region, is required to expand by 2.4% in the fourth quarter to achieve its 1% full-year economic outlook for 2023. The economies in ASEAN are expected to see growth of 4.2% in 2023 and 4.6% in 2024, a downward revision of 0.4 percentage points in 2023 and 0.3 percentage points in 2024, relative to our April World Economic Outlook. The downgrade reflects not only weaker growth outlooks and external demand, but also more lackluster domestic demand because of waning revenge consumption and monetary policy tightening. Improving domestic demand in Indonesia, Malaysia, and the Philippines has helped to support the rebound in economic growth momentum during the first half of 2023. Over the long run, the ASEAN region is expected to overcome the protracted negative economic shocks caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, and continue to be one of the fastest-growing regions of the world economy. This rapid pace of growth will be driven by both exports and domestic demand. Highlighting the increasing importance of ASEAN region as one of the world's largest consumer markets. By 2040, ASEAN's share to world GDP is projected to increase to 5.4% of world's economy. According to S&P Global, before 2040, the Philippines and Thailand will join Indonesia on the roster of major global economies, reaching over $1 trillion of nominal GDP. The Philippines is forecast to become one of the Asia-Pacific region's small group of $1 trillion economies by 2033. While Thailand will join in this grouping of the largest economies in APAC by 2036. Over the next 2 decades, the total ASEAN economy measured in nominal terms in US dollars is forecast to reach more than quadruple, increasing from $3 trillion in 2020 to $13.3 trillion by 2040. This will make the combined GDP of the ASEAN economies much larger than the GDP of Japan or Germany by 2040. Here are the projected gross domestic product (GDP) and other economic data in each country in Southeast Asia, based on the October 2023 edition of World Economic Outlook issued by the International Monetary Fund. Gross domestic product measured in terms of nominal value. Malaysia, ranked 6th in Southeast Asia in terms of gross domestic product measured in nominal value with GDP amounting to $430.8 billion. Malaysia ranked 3rd in GDP per capita amounting to $13,034. Vietnam, ranked 5th in the region in terms of GDP measured in nominal value amounting to $433.3 billion. The country ranked 6th in the region in GDP per capita, which amounts to $4,316. The Philippines, ranked 4th in Southeast Asia with GDP measured in terms of nominal value amounting to $435.6 billion, while it ranked 7th per capita amounting to $3,859. Singapore is the 3rd biggest economist in the region with a GDP amounting to $497.3 billion. It ranked 1st per capita amounting to $87,884. Thailand remains the 2nd biggest economist in Southeast Asia with a GDP amounting to $512.1 billion. In terms of GDP per capita, Thailand ranked 4th amounting to $7,297. Indonesia is the biggest economy in the region with an economy measured in nominal value amounting to $1,417 billion. In terms of GDP per capita, Indonesia ranked 5th amounting to $5,108. Gross domestic product, GDP measured by purchasing power parity. Singapore, ranked 6th in Southeast Asia in terms of gross domestic product measured in purchasing power parity with GDP amounting to $753.2 billion. Singapore ranked 1st in GDP per capita amounting to $133,107. Malaysia, ranked 5th in the region in terms of GDP measured in purchasing power parity amounting to $1,225 billion. The country ranked 3rd in the region in GDP per capita, which amounts to $37,082. The Philippines, ranked 4th in Southeast Asia with GDP measured in terms of purchasing power parity amounting to $1,278 billion, while it ranked 7th per capita amounting to $11,326. Vietnam is the 3rd biggest economist in the region with a GDP amounting to $1,434 billion. It ranked 6th per capita amounting to $14,285. Thailand remains the 2nd biggest economist in Southeast Asia with GDP amounting to $1,578 billion. In terms of GDP per capita, Thailand ranked 4th amounting to $22,490. Indonesia is the biggest economy in the region with an economy measured in purchasing power parity amounting to $4,393 billion. In terms of GDP per capita, Indonesia ranked 5th amounting to $15,835. Ranking based on gross national income. GNI is the total amount of money earned by the businesses and citizens of the nation. It is used to measure and track a nation's wealth from year to year. In terms of accumulated wealth per nation, Indonesia is still the wealthiest in the region, with accumulated earnings of $1,260 billion. Followed by Thailand with an accumulated wealth of $518 billion. The Philippines remains the third wealthiest nation in Southeast Asia with a gross national income of $457.02 billion. Malaysia is in the fourth spot with a GNI of $399.7 billion. Vietnam came closer, with a gross national income of $394.1 billion, followed by Singapore with a GNI of $378 billion. In terms of income group per country, measured using the GNI per capita, Singapore is the wealthiest in terms of average earning per capita amounting to $67,201, followed by Brunei, amounting to $31,406. Both countries are categorized as high-income countries. Southeast Asia's upper-middle-income countries are Malaysia with a GNI per capita of $11,778, followed by Thailand with an average income per capita of $7,234. Indonesia is now upgraded to upper-middle income when its GNI per capita reaches $4,576 at the end of 2022. Meanwhile, Vietnam and the Philippines are in transition to become upper-middle-income nations. Vietnam's GNI per capita is $4,041, while the Philippines' average income per capita is $3,954. While per market categorization, Singapore is a highly developed market economy as one of the four Asian tigers. Brunei is also considered a developed market economy. While Indonesia, Malaysia, the Philippines, and Thailand are newly industrialized countries. Vietnam and the other 5 smaller ASEAN countries are still categorized as developing market economies.